Now, the Melbourne Storm last night, 38 points to 14 over the Cows. Outstanding win. Some glimpses during that game when they fell asleep a little bit, and we're going to touch on that and a whole lot more with their assistant coach, Ryan Hinchcliffe. A hell of a nice guy, very good coach as well, and he joins us on the show right now. How are you, Ryan?
Morning, fellas. Good, thanks. Yourself?
Going very well. Thank you very much for joining us on a Saturday morning. First and foremost, the weather in Melbourne, is the beanie out yet during the day?
Yeah, it got proper cold this week, so we've been pretty lucky in Melbourne so far. We haven't had a whole lot of cold, but this week, the poor old Cowboys would have turned up for us, and geez, it would have felt cold for them because it was as cold as it's been this year down at Amy Park last night. So, bunkering down through winter.
Nice. Now, halfway through the season, Ryan, and you're 8-4, 2 byes, your third bye next week. How do you assess? You're second in the comp, second in the defence as well. How much more improvement has this team got to go for the rest of the season?
I think we've got a fair bit. So to be fair, we've the games we have lost. It's probably only been one game. I think it's the Dolphins where we're actually had a big score put on us. I think we lost to St George by I think it might have been 4. Lost to the Raiders by 1 in pretty controversial sort of circumstances. But in saying that, we've had a little bit to contend with this year compared to probably last year. We didn't have a whole lot of injuries throughout, a lot of last year, and this year we've had to contend with a few, as have a lot of teams. But with that comes a little bit of inconsistency and a little bit of up and down form. So I don't think many teams have they're all feeling that a little bit at times, and we're no different. But I'm still super confident that we have the team to go out and execute and win most games that we're playing in. But we probably have been a little bit more up and down this year.
Ryan, it's Adrian Prezenko. Obviously, the performance of Jahome Hughes was absolutely outstanding. 2 tries, some try setups as well. Can you tell us about his performance? And also, has he been sort of playing with injury for part of the season as well?
Yeah, he's had a little bit going on with his chest, so he's he's been battling that, to be fair, for probably the last 6 weeks. So, he probably hasn't, been at the level that he'd like to be at. But we had the bye there a couple of weeks ago, and he was, allowed him to sort of rest up and improve a little bit. But we know, he's a fantastic player. He's such a leader of our team, and he, when his game's on, and his running game and his kicking game, he certainly has a huge influence in our team. And he's the guy who's communicating and organising a lot of stuff. So he's obviously a very important part of our team, and the better he's playing, the better we're playing.
Hey Ryan, usually you've got Josh King, Stefano starting, and you've had Big Nas coming off the bench when he's come back from injury. But last night, Stefano and Nelson starting the game, Josh King off the bench. What's the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, it's just a little bit of a rotation, to be fair. So that's like, King is he's been unbelievable for us since coming from the Knights a few years ago, and just with Nelson, he took a little bit longer to get going this year, but he's really got himself fit at the minute, and we just thought, the opportunity to start with Nelson and Stefano, it's a pretty intimidating, front row duo. So we just wanted to give the option for those 2 guys to start together and see what sort of impact that has for us as a team. And obviously Trent, there at 13, he's sort of the guy who can move the ball a little bit. So it's just have a look at that combination. Whether we stick with it, we're not quite sure at this minute. But we thought it was just an opportunity to, we've got some pretty good depth in our ruck at the minute, just to rotate them around and see what it looks like.
There's obviously a New South Wales front row spot up for grabs. Unfortunate news about Mitch Barnett, but Stefano's been part of the wider team. What are your thoughts? There's obviously a few contenders for that role, but having already had a taste of Origin, how do you think he'd handle it if he got another crack?
Yeah, I think he'd handle it. He's he's a big, powerful guy. I don't think he's anywhere near his ceiling of his playing ability yet. I think he's still got a whole heap of growth left in him. Big, strong, powerful guy. He's fit. I think in that arena, obviously you need that little bit of experience is important as well. So he's played a fair bit of NRL. So I think if they're looking for a front rower, Stefano he'd be able step in and fill those shoes very well.
Hey, great news for the club, Ryan, during the week with the re-signing of Craig. Were you ever under the assumption that he wouldn't? Like, how much did you discuss that internally about his decision before he makes it?
Yeah, not a whole lot. That's to be fair. I sort of always thought that he'd coach on. I just think he loves coaching. He's done it for so long, and he's got a pretty good system in and around himself at the moment. So yeah, I didn't think at any stage that sort of from the conversations that we'd had, or just the way that he's coaching, or just within himself, that he was feeling like he wanted to give it up. He still enjoys it. He's still super passionate and super motivated about his coaching, and he could coach on for a long time yet. To be fair, he's like I said, he's got a pretty good system around him, and he's obviously got a lot of knowledge and a lot of wisdom that's still very beneficial for our club.
Now, Hinchy, I want to ask this about Aaron Bellamy. Now, you run the blue shirt. Do you flip a coin in who sits up in the box? Because I've noticed Aaron's getting very fidgety in the box as well. Did you win the toss, and that's why you're down on the field?
Yeah, well, I've sort of thought about going up in the box. I was sort of, and I'm like, I don't know, do I really need that on game day? So I think Aaron's probably the perfect foil for him, to be fair, because he can sort of calm him down, when he's in those moods, which Craig can get in the box. That's just pure passion that's coming out. But I think Aaron's probably the man for the job. Obviously his son. So I don't know. I kind of I want to really enjoy my game day, and I don't know if I'm sitting up there and got Craig screaming in the ear all day. I don't know how much I'd actually enjoy that. But Aaron does a great job in deciphering the rant that Craig goes on at times to the message down the bench, and then I sort of decipher that a little bit and give the players what I think they need to hear, what's going to help them.
We talked about Craig Bellamy and the fact that he's coaching on. That's become one of the great guessing games for us journos. Every year, Willie or
about 2010,
I know, it's been going on for about 15 years. But I guess internally, has there been talk about a succession plan? And Ryan, do you have sort of ambitions of your own in that space?
Yeah, I do, but not a whole lot, really. I think with Craig, he'll, because he's done it for such a long time, and he's so highly respected by our club. There hasn't really been any of those sort of conversations, internally. To be fair, for myself at the minute, it's about me growing and trying to be the best coach that I can be, and get as much experience as I can, and at some stage, if that's an option, then hopefully I've sort of got enough, it's got some experience behind me and knowledge behind me to maybe throw my hand up. Now,
if you were the head coach and you were organising the NRL schedule as well, so third week you have your third bye next week, Hinchy. So if you two-part question here. So if you could organise the scheduling, would you prefer to have a bye after the Origin period and get some of those players to relax a little bit? And is this the tricky part of coaching now, that last half of the season when you don't have any more byes?
Yeah, it is tricky. So that's to be fair. Like I suppose it depends a little bit of where your squad's at. Where's the health of your whole squad? Sometimes you really need that bye leading in because you might have a few injuries, and sometimes if they come out of Origin and not great, the bye suits you then. So it's hard to probably put your finger on and say this is exactly what you'd like to happen. I suppose the one thing that you would like is to probably not play 12 games straight at the back end of the year leading into finals. So that's probably what makes it a little bit tricky. Like I think getting the byes in and around Origin for us is beneficial, whether they're before games or after games. That definitely helps. The tricky part is, for us a little bit will be, I'm not sure we're not the only team, is navigating that last 12 weeks and trying to keep your squad as healthy as you possibly can, coming into the final series. So we'll sort of put some plans in place and, in and around, our draw and, turnarounds and whatnot to try and give some breaks at the back end of the year, so to try and rest our players up a little bit leading into finals. But yeah, what the answer is, I'm not quite sure. But like I said, it's hard when you've got to play 12 straight leading into finals without a doubt.
You just touched upon it there, Ryan, about giving players a break. And how do you think you'll handle it this Origin period in terms of players backing up after the last 2 games?
Yeah, we sort of, planned to, so Harry didn't play, and Harry and Xavier didn't play post the first Origin, and I think, there's plans for probably a couple of guys to, we could possibly have 5 in, this next one with Stefano, so for a couple of guys to maybe miss out again. So I think that's part of the plan that we've sort of put in place. Then you've also got to see how they actually come out of it. There's the possibility of injuries as well. So yeah, you sort of got to have a little bit of a plan in and around it, and and there's a bit of luck that comes involved with it as well, as with injuries and whatnot. So we have a plan. Hopefully we can sort of stick to that, and there's not too many curveballs for us.
Now, before we let you go, Ryan, thank you very much on a Saturday morning for joining us, mate. We ask our coaches each and every week to pick their player of the match in the sense of who would have slept the best, and this is brought to our very good friends at Temper. So from a coach's perspective, which player last night do you think from the Melbourne Storm would have slept pretty good?
Well, I think last night, Big Nelson. He's, he started the game. He hasn't started too many games this year, but he's got himself really fit. He's dropped a fair bit of weight, and I think his first stint was 30 minutes, and that's a big stint for a guy who's 125 kilos, and he's getting through a lot of work. So I think for him that's probably his biggest, longest starting stint, and it wasn't just about time; it was about the quality of what he did. Anyone who watched, you could see, how hard he is to handle, and and then come back on the second half and scored a pretty important try for us as well. So I think Big Nelson, once I don't think he'd take much rocket anyway, to be fair, to fall asleep. But I think once his head hit the pillow last night, he would have been pretty content with his performance, which was nice.
Great stuff. 38 points to 14. Victors over the Cowboys last night. Ryan Hinchcliffe, have a great rest of your weekend. Thanks for joining us, mate. Really appreciate it.
No worries. Cheers, fellas.